Metaphysical desire drags its victims toward the ambiguous point of fascination situated exactly at equal distances from both true detachment and intimate contact with the desired object. This is the strange area explored by Franz Kafka, quote, the frontier between solitude and communion, end of quote, equidistant from both and excluding both equally. The fascinated person who wants to hide his fascination from us and from himself must pretend to live according to one or the other of these modes of existence, which alone are compatible with the freedom and autonomy he prides himself on enjoying. Since these two poles of genuine freedom are at equal distances from his own position, the fascinated person has no reason to choose one rather than the other. He is as near and as far from proximity as from distance. He can claim either with as much and as little verisimilitude. Thus, we can predict that fascination will hide behind the mask of involvement as often as it hides behind the mask of detachment. This is precisely what is confirmed by the history of modern and contemporary romanticism. The myths of solitude, sublime, contemptuous, ironic, and even mystic, alternate regularly with the contrary and just as deceptive myths of complete surrender to the social and collective forms of historical existence. We can also predict that when the fascinated being reaches the paroxysmal stage of his sickness, he will be completely incapable of maintaining his original pose and will constantly change roles. The underground man has reached this stage. That is why there are no romantic attitudes which do not find an echo in his brief confession. We have already seen the underground man in solitude and detachment. Let us now trace his engagements. Zverkov and his friends have got up from the table. They are going to bring the evening to a close at a house of ill repute. Now, there's no point to his contemptuous walking up and down. Will the underground hero finally give up the siege and return to his room to take up the thread of his earlier reveries? Will he go back to dancing on Lake Como and exiling the Pope to Brazil? Will he once again turn his attention to the beautiful and the sublime? Not a chance. He hurries off after his mediator. As long as the mediator is immobile, it is not difficult to feign serene contemplation, but as soon as the idol moves away, the mask of indifference falls to the ground. We seem to break into the dangerous light of truth. The underground man cannot completely protect himself from this light, but he can shade its glare. We see him driven by his obsession, hurrying in pursuit of the absurd Zverkov, but that is not how he sees himself. He repudiates the sterile dreams of art for art's sake. He declares that he prefers hard contact with reality. In other words, he invents a doctrine of involvement for himself. He always has to make what was not the object of a choice appear as if he had chosen it. From the heights of his newfound truth, the underground man looks with scorn on the beautiful and the sublime of former times. He ridicules the romantic dreams which but a moment before were his own justification. And here's a quote from Notes from Underground. So this is it. This is it at last. Contact with real life, I muttered as I ran headlong downstairs. This is very different from the Pope's leaving Rome and going to Brazil, very different from the ball on the shores of Lake Como. You are a scoundrel. A thought flashed through my mind. If you laugh at this now. The last idea is particularly pungent. The underground man accuses himself of being too hard on his own mistakes. Dostoevsky cannot unveil the soul of his hero without shedding an equally pitiless but salutary light on all the excuses which help us to live. There is plenty of existentialism in the underground. There is surrealism in the early Stavrogian, who kisses the wives of functionaries at the sub-prefecture balls. The novelist forgets neither those who sanctify terror nor those who sanctify debauchery, neither the disciples of Saint Just nor the pupils of the Marquis de Sade. The tricks of a pride constantly involved in denying its gods are embodied in Dostoevsky's fictitious characters. In our day, we find them in the shape of philosophical and aesthetic theories. These theories never do more than reflect desire. They conceal it deep within that very reflection. Dostoevsky reveals it. In the writing of Notes from the Underground, Dostoevsky rises for the first time to the level of novelistic revelation. He escapes egotistic indignation and justification. He forgoes the literary fruits of the underground, renounces the beautiful and the sublime of white nights, and ceases to wallow in the misery of poor folk. He stops giving the name of involvement or non-involvement to the fixed distance of fascination. And he describes all the lies of which he is in the process of ridding himself. The man's health and the novelist's genius are indistinguishable. Only a radical misinterpretation of the message of his work would enable us to annex Dostoevsky to our own lives and renew the paradox of the romantic critic who appropriates for himself Don Quixote or the Red and the Black. We should not be surprised by the analogy between all these misinterpretations. The same need gives rise to the same confusion of the novelistic work with the romantic work. Metaphysical desire itself suggests these aberrant interpretations of all novelists. Once more, we must point out how easily ontological sickness transforms obstacles into resources and adversaries into allies. The correct interpretation of Dostoevsky's work is the discovery in it of the revelation of metaphysical desire in its supreme phase. To do this successfully, we must first free ourselves of the illusion which accompanies that desire, for it is precisely that illusion which permeates our world. Dostoevskian desire triumphs among us, and the Russian novelist's popularity is a paradoxical proof of the fact. Thus, Dostoevsky presents a particularly complex problem. His truth is neither stronger nor less scorned than that of other novelists. But the illusions he is denouncing are incomparably more powerful in our day than the illusions denounced by Cervantes, Stendhal, Flaubert, and even Marcel Proust. As usual, these illusions find their best expression in literature. Thus, to reveal the novelist's truth is to uncover the falsity of our own literature and vice versa. We have established this fact before, and we will establish it again. The moment we are no longer impressed by its prestige, contemporary neo-romanticism seems even more abstract and fanciful than previous romanticisms. The latter, without exception, exalted the strength of desire. Right up to Geats, the immoralist, and The Fruits of the Earth, the hero is always he who desires most intensely. This intense desire is the only spontaneous desire. It is opposed to the desires of others, which are always weaker because they are copied. The romantic cannot any longer hide from himself the role played by imitation in the genesis of desire, but that role, in his opinion, is bound up with a weakening of the original desire. The copy of the desire appears to be a rather crude carbon copy. Copied desires are always more blurred than the original. This is the same as saying these desires are never our own. In fact, our own desires always seem the most intense of all. The romantic thinks he can save the authenticity of his own desire by claiming that it is the most violent.